There's one thing people rarely talk about when discussing BTS and Bang Si-Hyuk. Who is truly the most valuable, in the sense of being genuinely cherished and impossible to let go? This isn't about who's the most famous or who has the biggest fandom, but about who, if they ever left, would send shockwaves straight into the heart of the company. I often find myself wondering, behind the smiles, contracts, and polished speeches, who does Bang PD actually protect at all costs? Let's break it down. Number 7. V. When I think about Taehyung in the context of Bang Si-Hyuk's emotional priorities, one word keeps coming back to me: freedom. Taehyung has always felt like someone who exists slightly outside the system, even while standing at its very center. From early on, his presence in BTS wasn't defined by strict logic or clear positioning. He wasn't the technical ace, not the obvious leader, not the disciplined symbol of the system working perfectly. He was instinct, mood, atmosphere, and Bang Si-Hyuk absolutely knows how rare that kind of artist is. You can see it in the way Taehyung was allowed to be odd, unpredictable, sometimes even contradictory to idol norms, and still protected. That tells me there is genuine affection there, not just professional appreciation. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Taehyung is also the kind of artist who does not need permission to exist. He has a face, a voice, and a personality that could survive almost any environment. Acting, solo music, fashion, art spaces that have nothing to do with BigHit's original philosophy. If I'm being honest, this is precisely why he ranks here. Because from Bang Si-Hyuk's perspective, Taehyung is valuable but not fragile. And in an industry built on fear of loss, fragility often determines how tightly someone is held. I personally feel that Bang PD looks at Taehyung and knows something bittersweet. If one day Taehyung chose to walk away, it wouldn't destroy him. It wouldn't silence him. He would still live artistically, loudly, confidently, without the machine behind him. That awareness changes everything. People rarely talk about this, but producers don't just love talent, they love dependence. Taehyung doesn't depend on the system the way others might. He collaborates with it, benefits from it, but he isn't defined by it, and that creates a subtle distance. I've noticed that Taehyung often follows his own internal compass, even when it confuses fans or disrupts expectations. That's not rebellion, it's self-trust. Bang Si-Hyuk respects that, I'm sure, but respect is different from fear of losing control. If Taehyung left tomorrow, it would hurt emotionally, yes, but the company wouldn't collapse internally, and Bang PD knows that too. In my personal view, Taehyung represents a paradox. He is deeply loved, yet never fully possessed. And maybe that's why his value feels different. Not lower, not lesser, just less tethered. He is the kind of artist you admire from a slight distance, knowing you cannot cage him without breaking what makes him special. From a monetization-safe, realistic industry lens, that makes him precious, but not irreplaceable in structure. Emotionally meaningful, but strategically survivable.
Number 6. Jungkook. Jungkook occupies a very complicated place when we talk about value through Bang Si-Hyuk's eyes, because he represents success in its purest, cleanest form. He is proof that the system worked. From the moment he entered BigHit as a teenager who chose a small company over giants, Jungkook became the living embodiment of Bang PD's vision paying off. Vocally strong, physically capable, visually appealing, endlessly adaptable, Jungkook is what the industry would call a perfect return on investment. And Bang Si-Hyuk absolutely cherishes that. You don't spend years watching someone grow up under your roof without developing genuine attachment. But here's the uncomfortable part that people rarely say out loud. Jungkook is strong enough to survive anywhere. In fact, he might thrive even more freely outside the structure that raised him. From my personal perspective, this changes how irreplaceable he is emotionally. Bang PD doesn't look at Jungkook with fear, he looks at him with confidence. Confidence that Jungkook will always land on his feet. Confidence that even if the world changes, Jungkook will adapt. And confidence reduces desperation. Jungkook is not someone Bang Si-Hyuk worries about losing control over, because Jungkook himself has internalized discipline, professionalism, and ambition. He doesn't need constant guidance anymore.
That's both a triumph and a limitation. Producers tend to hold tighter to those who might fall apart without the system. Jungkook is the opposite. He's resilient to the point of independence. I often feel that Bang PD sees Jungkook almost like a finished masterpiece, something you step back from once it's complete. You admire it, you protect it from harm, but you no longer need to shape it. And emotionally, that creates distance. Jungkook's value is massive, but it is stable, predictable, and secure. There's little panic attached to it. If Jungkook left, the loss would be enormous in branding and performance, but the emotional shock inside Bang PD himself might be quieter than people expect. Because deep down, he knows Jungkook would be okay. And in the ruthless logic of the industry, being okay anywhere makes you less terrifying to lose. Jungkook is loved, no doubt about that, but he is not clung to. He is trusted. And trust, while powerful, doesn't always create the kind of emotional dependency that defines someone as impossible to let go. That's why in this list, Jungkook stands at number 6, priceless as proof of success, but not the one Bang PD fears losing the most. Number 5, Jimin. When people talk about Jimin, they often stop at words like gentle, kind, or emotionally sensitive. But that barely scratches the surface of why he matters so deeply inside BTS, and why Bang Si-Hyuk's attitude toward him feels noticeably protective. Jimin is not just soft, he is emotionally precise. He senses shifts in mood before they become problems, he absorbs tension before it spills outward, and he often carries emotional weight that was never formally assigned to him. From early on, you could see Bang Si-Hyuk watching Jimin differently, not as a fragile asset, but as someone whose inner world required safeguarding. Especially when conversations around mental health began to surface more openly, Bang PD's concern toward Jimin felt less like corporate caution and more like human worry. That said, here's the uncomfortable part that I don't think fans like to sit with. Jimin is a balancer, not a foundation. He stabilizes what already exists. He does not architect the structure itself. And that distinction matters in a producer's hierarchy of fear. Jimin's role is emotional gravity. He keeps members grounded, keeps performances emotionally charged, keeps the group human when success threatens to turn them into symbols instead of people. Losing that would hurt deeply. It would leave a cold space in the group's emotional climate. I personally believe Bang Si-Hyuk understands this loss would be painful, even haunting on a personal level. But pain does not always equal collapse. Systems don't fall apart because they lose softness, they fall apart when they lose direction, control, or creation. Jimin doesn't control the narrative, he doesn't define the musical philosophy, and he doesn't anchor the corporate vision. What he does is make everything livable. And that's why this ranking feels cruel but honest. If Jimin were to leave, the emotional damage would be severe. Fans would feel it immediately. The members would feel it privately. Bang Si-Hyuk would feel it as guilt and regret. But the machine would keep moving. And I think Bang PD knows that too. That knowledge creates a strange tension. You protect someone not because they are indispensable to the system, but because they are indispensable to the people inside it. In my personal view, Jimin represents the conscience of BTS, the quiet reminder that success still involves human cost. Bang Si-Hyuk's protectiveness toward him feels less strategic and more moral. But morality in this industry rarely dictates who is impossible to let go. Jimin is deeply loved, genuinely cared for, and emotionally central. Yet in the cold arithmetic of survival, he is not the pillar holding the structure up. And that's why he stands here, not because he matters less, but because his value is felt in pain, not in collapse. Number 4. Jin. When I place Jin at this position, I do it with a strange mix of respect and quiet frustration, because Jin's value is the kind that rarely gets celebrated out loud. He is not the architect of BTS's sound, not the intellectual compass, not the creative engine that pushes concepts forward. And yet, removing Jin would fundamentally change the emotional temperature of the group. Jin is stability in human form. He is the member who absorbs tension before it turns into conflict, who lightens moments that could easily become too heavy, too serious, too exhausting. Bang Si-Hyuk understands this more than most fans realize. Behind the scenes, Jin isn't just cracking jokes, he's regulating energy. He's reminding everyone that they are still people living together, not just assets chasing global dominance. What's rarely discussed is how dangerous long-term pressure can be to a group like BTS. Fame amplifies ego, insecurity, and burnout all at once. Jin acts as a pressure valve. He doesn't lead by authority, he leads by normalcy. And that is incredibly rare in idol groups built on hierarchy and perfection. From Bang PD's perspective, losing Jin wouldn't immediately affect chart performance or creative output, but it would quietly erode the internal sense of home that keeps the group psychologically intact. I personally believe Bang Si-Hyuk values Jin as an emotional insurance policy. He may not drive the machine, but he prevents it from overheating. That said, here's the uncomfortable truth that places Jin at number 4 instead of higher. In a strategic, corporate sense, stability is often viewed as maintainable. Producers convince themselves that atmosphere can be adjusted, that warmth can be recreated, that maturity can be replaced by time. Jin's role, as vital as it is, doesn't directly shape the company's creative direction or intellectual identity. He supports rather than commands. He sustains rather than initiates. And in the cold logic of industry leadership, that makes him a pillar, not a core engine. I also think Bang Si-Hyuk sees Jin as someone who understands sacrifice without resentment. Jin carries responsibility quietly, without demanding recognition. That makes him dependable, but it also makes his absence easier to rationalize, at least on paper. Emotionally devastating, yes. Structurally fatal, no. And that distinction matters. From my personal lens, Jin is the kind of member whose value is only fully understood after loss, when the space he filled suddenly feels hollow and unfamiliar. Bang PD likely knows this, but leaders are trained to survive loss, not dwell on it. So Jin becomes irreplaceable in feeling, yet replaceable in planning. That contradiction defines his position here. He is the home BTS returns to after chaos, but not the map that determines where they go next. And that is why, in a list about who Bang Si-Hyuk would struggle to let go of the most, Jin stands firmly, respectfully, at number 4.
Number 3. J-Hope. This is where the list stops feeling theoretical and starts feeling heavy, because J-Hope is not a concept, not a narrative role, not a replaceable function. He is energy in its purest form. And I don't mean energy as in bright or cheerful, the way fans often reduce him to. I mean structural energy, the kind that keeps a system moving even when motivation collapses. Bang Si-Hyuk once openly acknowledged that without HYBE, the internal dynamics of BTS would fall apart, and I don't think that was a polite exaggeration. I think that was a rare moment of honesty. J-Hope is the member who wakes the room up, who recalibrates the mood when tensions rise, who turns exhaustion into momentum, and from a producer's perspective, that is terrifyingly valuable. People underestimate how much discipline lives inside HYBE's smile. Behind the laughter is someone who tracks timing, alignment, rehearsal quality, emotional temperature. He is not just dancing, he is monitoring, not just performing, but stabilizing. I personally believe Bang Si-Hyuk sees J-Hope as the silent insurance policy of BTS. When creativity stalls, HYBE brings motion. When conflict brews, he brings levity without denial. When confidence drops, he injects belief. That's not a role you can assign to someone else. It's personality, lived experience, and instinct fused together. And here's the uncomfortable part. Groups can survive losing stars, but they rarely survive losing engines. If J-Hope were removed, BTS would still exist on paper, but the atmosphere would fundamentally change. Rehearsals would feel heavier, silence would linger longer, emotional gaps would widen. From an industry standpoint, this is where Bang Si-Hyuk's fear likely begins. Not panic, but quiet calculation. Because HYBE is not the loud leader, not the main spokesperson, not the obvious center of power. And yet, he holds the group upright in ways that don't show up on charts. In my opinion, that makes him dangerously irreplaceable.
I also think Bang PD understands that J-Hope's optimism is not naive. It is chosen. It is work. And work ethic is something Bang Si-Hyuk values deeply. If you strip BTS of J-Hope, you don't just lose a performer, you lose the emotional regulator, the internal metronome, the backup heart that kicks in when the main one struggles. Letting him go would not be dramatic on the surface, but internally, it would feel like the system slowly losing oxygen. And that's why this rank feels heavy, because at number 3, we're no longer talking about affection, we're talking about survival. Number 2. RM. If BTS were a living body, Namjoon wouldn't just be the brain, he would be the nervous system connecting thought, emotion, and direction. And the more I think about Bang Si-Hyuk's relationship with RM, the clearer it becomes that this is not ordinary affection. This is trust, the rarest currency in the entertainment industry. Bang PD doesn't just like Namjoon, he relies on him. And reliance is dangerous, because it means if that person disappears, the entire structure starts malfunctioning. From the very beginning, RM wasn't just leading members, he was translating an entire philosophy. BTS was never designed to be a typical idol group, and without someone capable of articulating that difference, the world would never have understood what Bang Si-Hyuk was trying to build. In my personal view, RM is the reason BTS was taken seriously outside Korea long before it was fashionable to do so. His interviews didn't just answer questions, they reframed perceptions. He didn't sell an image, he explained a worldview. That matters more than charts. What people often miss is that Bang Si-Hyuk is not a front-facing visionary. He operates from the shadows, from concepts, systems, long-term narratives. RM became his voice without being his puppet. That balance is incredibly hard to find. RM could challenge ideas, reshape them, even disagree while still carrying the original intent forward. That tells me Bang PD trusted his judgment, not just his obedience. And for a producer, that kind of trust is terrifying and priceless at the same time. Without RM, BTS might still have been successful, but would they have been understood? I doubt it. They could have been labeled, simplified, reduced to trends. RM prevented that. He contextualized pain, ambition, youth, and growth in a language the world could digest without stripping it of meaning. I personally believe Bang Si-Hyuk saw RM not just as a leader, but as insurance. Insurance that BTS would not be misinterpreted, exploited, or hollowed out by the industry. And that's a heavy role to place on one person. If RM ever left, the loss wouldn't be immediate chaos. It would be something more dangerous: confusion, directional drift, a loss of intellectual gravity. The members would still shine, the music would still exist, but the invisible thread tying everything together would fray. And Bang PD knows this. That's why RM is protected, listened to, and positioned not just as a performer, but as a thinker. In the hierarchy of emotional attachment, RM is not the most fragile, but he is one of the most indispensable. From my perspective, Bang Si-Hyuk doesn't just fear losing RM as an artist, he fears losing the clarity RM brings to the entire vision. Number 1. Suga. This is where I stop pretending to be neutral. This is the point where the list stops feeling like entertainment and starts feeling uncomfortable. Because when we talk about Yoongi, we're not just talking about a member of BTS. We're talking about something far more dangerous and far more valuable: memory, ideology, and control over direction. Yoongi is not just part of BigHit's success story. He is a living archive of its survival. He remembers the uncertainty, the debt, the ridicule, the nights when belief mattered more than numbers. And Bang Si-Hyuk knows this. Deep down, I believe Bang PD doesn't just value Yoongi, he relies on him in a way that goes beyond contracts or public narratives. Yoongi understands Bang Si-Hyuk's musical philosophy without needing long explanations. He understands the balance between artistry and market pressure, between honesty and survival. That kind of understanding cannot be trained or replaced. It only comes from shared struggle. What makes Suga terrifyingly valuable is that he can exist in the shadows. He doesn't need the spotlight to control the outcome. He can produce, critique, redirect, and quietly fix things when everything starts slipping. When BTS's sound risks becoming too safe or too commercial, Yoongi is often the internal voice pulling it back to something raw, grounded, and honest. This isn't speculation for me, this is pattern recognition. You don't give that much creative influence to someone you don't trust with the soul of your work, and trust, in this industry, is rarer than talent. Personally, I think if Yoongi ever left, the loss wouldn't be loud at first. There wouldn't be immediate chaos, but slowly, something would start to feel hollow. The music might still succeed, the charts might still respond, but the ideological spine would weaken, because Yoongi represents the original reason BTS mattered. Not perfection, but truth born from pain. Bang Si-Hyuk built the structure, yes, but Yoongi reinforced it from the inside. He questions decisions, challenges comfort, and isn't afraid to be unpopular internally if it protects the core message. That kind of internal opposition is priceless. If I'm being brutally honest, Yoongi is the member Bang PD cannot replace with strategy. He cannot be bought with better contracts or recreated through trainees. Losing Yoongi would mean losing the internal conscience that remembers why BTS started in the first place. And that's why, to me, he is the most valuable in the truest sense. Not the most famous, not the most visible, but the one whose absence would quietly dismantle the foundation. When people ask who Bang Si-Hyuk would never want to let go, my answer isn't dramatic, it's practical. Yoongi holds too many keys, to the past, to the sound, to the ideology, and once something like that walks away, you don't get it back.